When you create a new image in Photoshop, you want to set its resolution. And the resolution is going to be the height and the width of the image and the number of pixels per inch, which is commonly known as PPI. And in the world of printing, it's known as DPI. So PPI stands for pixels per inch, DPI stands for dots per inch. When you create that new document, you go to File, you select New, and in this new dialog box that will pop up, you can define the number of pixels, and you can also determine the resolution, which will be the pixels per inch. Now you can define this using inches, so I can say I want something that is 17 inches wide by 11 inches tall, and then you can change the number of pixels. So a higher value of pixels per inch is going to mean that there's more pixels in any 1 square inch in that document. So basically it means there's a greater number of pixels in the document itself. The resolution is really dependent upon the type of project you're working on. So if you're working on a web-based project, typically the size of that project is going to be 72 pixels per inch. And the reason is because screens have a limited pixel density. Now, many screens have a greater pixel density, but most artists will still default to 72 because that has been the standard for a long time. If you're going to create something that's going to be printed, let's say on a printing press, that's going to be printed on a color copier or your printer at home, you'll want to increase that resolution to 300. The process of printing, that physical process, usually has a greater density of pixels that are needed. If you use a lesser value, then that image that's being printed will probably not be as clear and crisp as you want. So just remember, as a rule of thumb, if you're doing a web-based project, it's 72. If you're doing a print-based project, it's 300 pixels per inch. Now, if you find an image online that you like and you're curious about the number of pixels in that image, you can go to Image and you can go to Image Size. Now here in the Image Size dialog, you can see the size of the image in terms of space that it takes up. So this takes up approximately 67.5 megabytes. You can see the pixel dimensions, and then it will give you the resolution. Now, by default, it's set to 100% under width and height. If you want to increase the resolution or change the width and height, you can change the numbers here. So I went from 100% to 200%, and it basically doubles the number of pixels in the image itself. You can also change this based on pixels. So you can add a value here that's going to change the pixel size. Now, what happened here was I had values set in here. You can also change it to inches here, so you can change that based on increasing the width and height based on inches. If you change the resolution itself and it's set to pixels, let's say, what you're going to see is the number of pixels increase. So if I go from 72 to 300, the number of pixels have increased, but the dimensions in inches is not going to change. So increasing the resolution, which is based on pixels per inch, to a higher number will increase the number of pixels, but it will not change the image dimensions. So that's something to be aware of if you want to change the resolution. Sometimes you'll want to change the resolution, but you won't want to change the number of pixels. So when you change the resolution and it's adding more pixels or taking away pixels, that's called resampling. It has to calculate pixels that didn't exist before and add them, or it has to take away pixels in some way. So whenever you resample, it's going to affect the quality. Resampling higher, when you go from 72 to 300, let's say, is going to cause a reduction in quality. Resampling lower is usually less of an issue. So when you take away pixels, it's less of an issue. When you're having to add pixels, it's more of an issue. If you don't want to resample, you can turn this off. And then when I change the resolution to a higher number or a lower number, basically the number of pixels always stays the same, but it's doing the inverse of increasing resolution is basically just changing the scale of the document. So if I lower the number of pixels per inch, it's going to change the scale to always ensure that you have the same amount of pixels in that document, which is 5,962 by 3,955 in this circumstance. So if you want to change the size of the document and keep the same resolution, which is the total amount of pixels, then turn off resampling. And that way the image is just going to change in scale, but it's going to always be the same quality because you didn't add or subtract pixels in that image. So just remember, if you ever want to change the actual image size itself in terms of the quality of the image, you just go to image and you select image size. If you want to change the canvas size, you can go to image and increase or decrease the canvas size. But when you do this, you'll add pixels, but it won't change the actual image. So if I go to increase canvas size, and let's say I want to increase that canvas, I can add more pixels to the top and to the bottom, but it's just increasing the amount of space in the canvas, and that way I can maybe add more images or do more manipulation to fill up the space in different ways, but it's not increasing the actual pixels based on the image itself. It's only adding to the dimensions of the image. There's no resampling that's occurring here, but it's increasing the height and the width of that image.